And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up reading Call of the Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. This is the second in the Tide Child Trilogy, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing the book, which was just now. I am in shock, everybody, at how good this book is. It's legitimately, and I don't want to use hyperbole here, but it's legitimately one of the greatest books that I've ever read in my entire life. It blew me away in every single way. And I say this as somebody who thoroughly loved and said kind of similar things about the first book in this series, The Bone Ships. And the first one in the series blew me away because I was not ready for it. You know, I haven't heard incredible things about this series. I've heard it's good. I haven't heard very many people say it's outstanding. And when I read it, I just had my face blown off by what I just read and how perfect it was. Reading this one, my expectations were very high. The first one was so good that I thought, this is the series for me. And the second one blew the first one out of the water. It's honestly, and I'd have to really go down and look at my notes and stuff, but it's for sure a top 20 book of all time for me, maybe even a top 10 book. It's just shocking. And you know, it does so many things that I feel are like tailor-made for me. It's almost like a cheat code. And that I'm finding that I have this thorough love for naval fantasy books, and there's not a ton of them. You know, you had the Live Ship Trader trilogy, which is so good to me. I mean, you have Red Seas Under Red Skies in the Gentleman Bastard series that is just incredible to me. But there's not a lot of books that have that naval aspect to them that are fully in the fantasy realm. I mean, there's certainly naval books, and I'm cool with that genre. I mean, that's good to me, but not like this. I mean, when I've thought about what I would dream of in a fantasy book, it's this book. You know, bigger than life set pieces, an epic fantasy set on the open seas. You know, bigger than life sea monsters, and all of these things combine into this just incredibly wonderful read. In these major events, just incredible in every single way. So I want to now go through, like I do in all my videos, and break down all the different aspects of the book and my ranking system, and why I've come to think of this book as a top tier book. And so let's start with the story. The story is going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. This is less of a concrete point A to point B story than the first one. And the first one, I don't want to ruin any plot, but all the characters from rather early on in the book are trying to achieve a singular goal. Now that goal is done, and I won't say whether it was succeeded or they failed, but that goal is clearly done now. And going into the second book, it's less obvious what they have to do. Now the plot gets a little bit unraveled, but I liked it because it wasn't so obvious on, we're going to just march down this path to go here. It's, let's go here. Oh, the mystery is going to get delved into a little bit more. Now we need to go off and do this kind of side quest to eventually get back to the bigger quest. It added more complexity to the story, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And the pacing was so much better. Now, in the first book, the pacing was slow. You know, I took about halfway through the book to really get into the meat of it. Now, the pacing is fast. It has these moments of slowdown so you can take in the events that you just did, but it ramps right back up again, oftentimes higher than the previous hump. You know, every chapter or two, major events were happening that just left me with a smile on my face because of how enjoyable everything was. So a lot quicker pacing with very steady action pieces. There were wonderful twists that happened in here, not like world-changing in the sense of like a Mistborn or some Stormlight Archive stuff where you're just like, whoa, now everything that I've read before has changed and I want to go read it again. But the twists, just when they happen, they're fun. It adds a lot of entertainment to the story, a new crazy hijinks story that has to happen, and the story within a story. And they were all very well executed. So the story is just incredible, 5 out of 5. Now let's go to the world building. The world building might be my favorite part of this book and this series in general. It's another 5 out of 5. The world is so richly crafted. I will never forget, never in my life will I forget the world that's been created here. Essentially sea dragons, they have a special name here. I won't even try to pronounce it. And they have to harvest the bones from these sea creatures in order to create more ships, because the landscape has been changed and that they can't grow trees to make boats. They have to use the bones of dragons to create these ships, but dragons haven't been seen in a very long time, so the ships are dwindling. That's a cool concept. And so they're at war with each other, but the war is seemingly, getting down to a focal point where it's not going to really be able to happen much longer, because both sides are dwindling in numbers of the amount of ships they have, because dragons have not existed for a very long time. I love all the different locations that were investigated here. The world has gotten expanded because not only did the characters go from point A to point B, but they went to all these different locations too. Had all these different adventures on these different islands with these different fortresses and different peoples, and just awesome. I love so much about the rich world building here. It's amazing. So the fantasy elements. Surprise, surprise, this is another 5 out of 5. I think that the sea dragons plot line and how awe-inspiring they are is just so fun. And if it was just for them, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 5. But you add these other things here. This aspect of the bone ships. The bone ships are cool. It's so cool to imagine these ships made out of dragon bones, and they are just in the husk of a dead dragon. That's awesome. There's this story in particular got a much more heavy emphasis on these half bird, half humans. Again, I won't try to say their names, I'll butcher it. But they control the wind, but not to an infinite supply. They're not these all-powerful creatures. They can use it in spurts. Some of the creatures are more powerful than others, and they have to get recharged at the central points on each island. So it adds this kind of video gamey aspect where they run out of mana. It's not called mana, but that's essentially what's happening here. And it's just fun. It adds a lot of depth to the story, and it's pure fantasy, and I love it. Now let's talk about the characters. Another 5 out of 5. The characters are amazing. The main sea captain is this woman who is, this kind of Mary Sue type character where, she's faultless. She's just this incredible captain, just turned this boat into this super tough fighting machine that was down and out. But she's getting a much richer character here, and you're finding out that she's not, a Mary Sue. She has depth to her. She's not perfect. She certainly has her faults. She has to trust the people on her ship in a greater and greater capacity in this book, and it made her a much more real character for me. The main POV is her number 2 on the ship, and you're getting much more depth into this character. He's becoming much more sure of himself. He went from, this drunk at the beginning of the first book and has lost all ability to lead, and he's getting more confidence. He's becoming a much bigger, better person, even though he has some insecurities inside. Everybody else is seeing him in this different way. I thought that they wrote in some bad characters in this story, some of them which are on the main ship, some of them which they're essentially fighting against, not just from the rival nation, but their own nation, because they're kind of outlaws in this story. They're truly pirates. Pirate stories. Yeah, give me more pirate stories. But the bad guys, you want them to burn a fiery death, which I love. I love well written, compelling bad guys. I love a good bad guy, and they're frequently done in this story. This is kind of a good versus bad story, but I don't mind it. I don't need this crazy gray character all the time, even though there is a little bit about this in the book with some of the characters. I also really like that there were more attention was made to some of these side characters. You got much more in depth, and I'll go into that in a second in the writing quality section. But I love that we got a lot more depth in some of these side characters. So let's talk about that writing quality. Another 5 out of 5. I am gushing at the quality and the prose with how good R.J. Barker can write a story. Now, he did something new here in this one that I really loved. So all of the book, virtually all the book, is through the eyes of the main character, the main POV. And he doesn't see everything because the story's starting to branch out and these major events are happening elsewhere. But what R.J. Barker did here is whenever the main character would meet up with one of these other characters, they would essentially tell him a story. Then you got to have a full chapter hearing what happened off screen from the perspective of this other person. And that's just cool. I love being able to get those flashback moments, not only to get the depth of what happened, but to learn more and to care more about some of these side characters. And it's done in a really cool way, where the chapters kind of have these subheaders, like, you know, what X character saw, and then they'll go through the main thing. And then, you know, part 2, what main character did, boom, boom, boom. It's almost written out like an essay, but it's compelling and it's fun. And many of these, they're rather funny too. It really is just like a fun pirate story. Not too serious. It doesn't take itself too seriously, although there are these serious moments, especially towards the end of this book when the main conflict is coming to a head and some actually emotional things are happening. And the end of the book, it just ends on this very, like, you want to pick up that third book immediately. Not so much a cliffhanger, but it ended in such a deeply compelling spot that you must read what happens at the end of this. So for overall enjoyability, clearly I'm going to give this 5 out of 5. Absolutely incredible. The only negative thing I will say about this book, the only negative thing is I am sad that I'm almost done. I could read about this world forever. I wish this was a 20-book trilogy. I wish they just went off and did side character after side character, told a different plot line in a different part of this world. I need more of R.J. Barker telling tales at sea. Give me more of that. Now, I've never read an R.J. Barker book before this series, but I'm a big fan. I can't wait to go back and read every single book he's ever written and every single book he's going to write. I am #1 in the R.J. Barker fan club, and I urge you to come join with me. There's plenty of room. We have cake. So that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, happy reading to you.